Hey, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the 1-2 Radio Halloween Marathon. This is our first show kicking off our super fun day of Friday celebrations for Halloween. This is Katie Weaver, and our first show today is Samhain Through the Ages. I'm so excited to bring our guests on, but before I do, I just want to make sure that you guys know what's happening today. So, first of all, here at 1-2 Radio, we have a lineup of 7 shows for you, which you may know that we're never live on Fridays. So this is a completely different turn for us, but we're super, super excited to get to do it. So of course, we're going to start with Samhain Through the Ages. And the next show is Witchy Ways, followed by I See Dead People, a mediumship panel. Nearly Dead, talking about NDEs. Things That Go Bump in the Night, scary stories. Jay's Halloween special. He's bringing spooky campfire tales and other chilling true stories with medicine woman and spiritual coach Heather Aguilera. And then Julie's going to wrap up the day with her own Halloween special. So that's what's happening. So hopefully you guys can hang out with us all day long and just play and have some fun. So we're so excited. We also are on sale over at 1-2 Radio today, or 1-2 Listen, sorry, all day to celebrate pre-Halloween. I think Mark called it TGI Halloween. It's almost Halloween, and we're happy to be celebrating with a reduced price over there as well. So in between being on all of these awesome shows, you'll find most of us over at 1-2 Listen today as well. So it's a great day for a reading. So with all of that said, I want to bring on our panelists. I am so excited and fascinated to hear what these guys all have to say. And they are all people that should be here speaking on this topic. So of course, we are very excited to bring Erica Longden on. Erica, good morning, or good afternoon and evening for you.
Good morning. And I've got a cup of tea that will do for whatever time of day it is. Good morning. Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. And we have Caroline Nettle. Caroline, hello.
Hey, welcome from across the pond. And just want to say, may your ancestors be close and bring you wisdom at this time. That's what I learned this morning. So I thought I'd start the show with that.
Wonderful. And our sage, can we call him a sage? I think we can. Our wisdom holder and wisdom bearer here in the 1-2 world, Mo Abdelbaki. Hello, Mo.
Well, good morning, and thank you for that. That's pretty nice.
Well, you
sage is great in sausage, so I think I'm perfect for that.
if the sage fits, I guess. Okay. If the casing fits, I don't know. Well, I'm so
Thank
happy.
you. You're very kind.
Well, don't ask my husband, but it's okay. Yeah. So we wanted to bring this show first because, well, partly because Erica and Caroline are on it, and they're going to want to go to bed at some point. But it makes sense to talk about Samhain through time. What is this holiday? Where did it start? Because we know that dressing up in costumes and running around neighborhoods isn't exactly how this all began. It's a little different. And I think it's important that we have a good foundation in that. Also, because so many of us have ancestry that resonates with this topic and with the old ways. And I think it's really important that we do learn as much as we can and allow ourselves to tie into that. And so, Erica, when you think about Samhain in the history or the beginnings of what we now call Halloween, I know there's some very marked differences, but what does that mean to you?
Well, it's interesting because it was our fault over here in the UK. I think a lot of it was strange. It was Celtic. So it was Scots, Welsh and Irish. I think the English didn't have too much to do with it. But yeah, we started it and then we exported it, I think somewhere around 1840 or something. It went over to the States and then we sort of stopped doing it. As a child in the 50s, in suburbia, I wasn't so aware of it. And then it's come back over here. So I find that it's an interesting infinity loop that it's done. But for me, Halloween is Samhain, which is the original pagan before the 8th century when the church thought, no, we have to get involved with this and call it All Hallows. So to me, it's the pagan festival of the light changing into the dark. It's the changeover of the year. The Celts thought it was Samhain was the end of the year and 1st of November was Happy New Year.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And how anyone can jump in on this question, but Samhain was originally celebrated differently.
Yes. So as when all religions sort of take over, so originally Samhain was at the end of August, I'm sorry, but it befitted the Christian church to put it all into All Hallows Eve and make it a Christian festival. So it was hoiked from the end of August to the end of October. But what it really represented before the Christian church took over was very much this is when we allow the parts of us that we no longer need to die off. So any old habits or behaviors that we don't like. And well, literally, and on the night of Samhain, we would then walk into the next year sort of clean and derobed, as it were, of all the sins and the problems and the issues and the things that we didn't like about ourselves. So it really was a death ritual where the old us died and we woke the next morning and we were sort of brand new. So there's a lot of, it was the end of the year. They couldn't afford to keep their animals, so they cooked them. There was a lot of rebirth and putting the bones of these animals that they'd eaten back into the soil, great potassium. So it was a kind of the end of the cycle, the beginning of the new one, as Erica said.
Okay. How do you see that for us now? Like obviously it is, basically the witch's new year, but how do you see that applying to us in current day, or how do you apply it to yourselves?
I love it as a celebration of, I think we've lost the art of ritual. We just kind of, because we have modern devices, we just barrel on through the year. And I think the importance of Samhain to me is it is one of the wheels of the year in pagan, and it's a ritual, and marking of rituals is very important for our well-being. That's why I love it. It is, as Caroline said, it's the changeover, it's leaving the old behind, it's going into the darkness because the days are shorter, and if you were living with the land, you'd done your harvest, it had to be in. There's lots of beautiful rituals around it. I've come across a couple this year that I hadn't met before. A beautiful one of doing, is it okay to share this one with you quickly?
Please, absolutely.
Is to take some seeds. They would have been crops, but it could be flower seeds. Think of wildflowers. It would be beautiful to do with it. And you have your little sack, your pouch of wildflowers, and you put them on a plate and you put a candle in the center and you put the wildflowers around in a circle, a sacred circle, and you bless it and you let the candle burn down. And the next day you go out and you throw those seeds into the soil so that they will reflower next year. And they did the same with apples. They would cut an apple, which is why I thought, why are apples? Because you think pumpkins, but actually the prevalence of apples at this year, bobbing for apples, toffee apples, all of that. If you cut an apple through horizontally, you get a 5-star, you get the pentacle.
Yeah.
And there is a tradition of burying that half apple into the earth in honoring your ancestors so that spirits would be reborn. I love that. I love the whole rebirth thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that, Erica. Thanks for that. And also, for me, I think we've really lost touch with the fact that we have an army of ancestors behind us who came before us, who knew masses and masses of things they learnt and taught and passed on, and we've sort of lost touch as a society, maybe not the people on this platform, possibly not, but in general, we seem to have lost touch with the ancestors. So I love the fact that even though it's got very commercial and probably quite a long way away from this, but for those of us that know, this really is a time to commune with those that went before us and ask them to help us with their wisdom and show us what we're doing right and wrong and what we could do better, etc. We have so much to learn from those that have gone before us. So that's my opinion. But I did find out today, Katie, somebody sent me an email and it said that we have been trick-or-treating as humans since the 16th century. I was like, wow, that's a long old time.
Actually, since quite before that.
Oh,
Trick-or-treating actually was noted in ancient Egypt.
Wow.
And for quite
Wow.
the same reason. What's interesting is that Samhain is actually not unique in the world. It's the best of them, I think. I think it's pretty amazing. But it's based on an agricultural culture. And so the deal is that after every harvest, there is, generally speaking, in the ancient world and even in modern times, there is usually going to be a festival of the dead. And that is because it was imperative to feed the dead after we had fed ourselves. They had to be fed, and they had to be fed once the harvest was shut up. And that was what happened on Samhain, it was the last day of the harvest. Anything left in the fields after Samhain had to stay there all winter long. And then transients would come by, or, spirits or whatever. But, for example, in ancient Egypt, the harvest took place at a very different time because they had a different growing season due to the Nile flood. But right after the big harvest, they would have a what's known as the Wag festival, and it would be a great festival for Osiris, but also for all the dead who have come before. And they would take little boats and float them on the Nile with little candles in them, probably just oil of some sort. And so there would be hundreds of thousands of little boats on the Nile at night. I mean, I just think that's remarkable. And so we see that there is a kind of a connection to the idea of the original, Jack-o'-lantern, the jack-o'-lanterns and so on. But it really is about feeding the dead. And one of the reasons for that was because my ancestors, the Egyptians, were terrified of the walking dead. They believed, not like zombies in a movie. Should I tell a quick story about this? It's
Yeah,
good for
please.
Halloween. All right.
Absolutely.
It was believed that you had to feed your ancestors, that when they died, they would still be hungry. This was a function of the Ka, and I won't get into all of that. But there was a fellow who said, I've been paying the priest to feed Dad for a while here, and I'm really kind of tired of it. So let's just let it go. It'll be fine. And one day there's a knock on his door. He opens it up, and there's his dead father, right? Mummified and jaw hanging down. And he says, "You haven't fed me. And I am angry and I am hungry." So he came into the house and said, "Feed me." And they're feeding him all this food. And of course, every time he touches something, they can't eat it, because it's kind of his. And it just falls through his jaw. And so when he goes to every neighbor in the neighborhood and says, "Look at what my son did." And he does this for 14 days. And then he says, "I'm going back now to get some sleep. Are you going to feed me from now on?" So that was, he did. That was kind of the beginning, because there was, during this festival after the harvest, there would be this mass of people who would go to the mortuary centers, to the tombs and all of that, and everything would be washed and cleansed, and there would be the favorite food set out, and you would then pay the priest to take care of your loved one and so on and so forth in their tombs. And so it's kind of like that in Samhain, because what we're saying is we have to feed our dead because we want their blessings. You see, you're right, Caroline, about the fact that we want the blessings of the dead. It's very important. It's vital in all cultures. The Wag Festival, the Asian festivals that go on, the Dios de los Muertos in this country. Are you familiar with that one?
Yes, I've watched Coco.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
If you were here, I would say go to a mainly Latino cemetery. I happened by one accidentally. And it was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. It was a celebration of those who have come before. And that is one of the ways that Samhain, our modern Halloween, was. It was about remembering and tending to, making sure that we don't forget our ancestors, but also making sure that we give them what they need to survive on that other plane.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
I love that. So just interjecting from a different place, from the place of a medium, this is really interesting to me because so often in mediumship, I've had spirits tell me how much they miss eating.
Mm-hmm.
That the
thread.
That the act of eating, the act of drinking is something, that sensation is something that they really miss. And often I have them ask their people, eat my favorite foods, have a drink for me. And we've always kind of, you toast for someone who's died or whatnot. But I agree, Mo, it is a common thread. And now I've got my wheels turning about what should I, because I feel like it needs to honor my people here, but anyway, so that is to me an interesting thread. And Caroline, I was thinking about Coco as well as Mo was talking. If you guys have not watched Coco,
it's gorgeous. It's
such
so
a beautiful
gorgeous.
film. Yeah, it is highly recommended this season for sure.
Indeed. Yeah.
Mo, I'm curious, do you have a ritual that you honor your relatives with or your ancestors with this time of year?
I do it just about every day, to be honest with you. I have a deep sense of connection with my father, my mother, but I would be honest, mostly through my dad. And I have an entire bookcase that is filled with stuff that might be one gigantic altar. I had someone tell me that once. I said, I don't have any altars. And the guy looked at my bookcase. He said, are you kidding me? And but it's, for me, I can never lose sight of where I came from. I just found out what my dad's dad did, because I was born in the UK. And when my dad was in school there, and then they came over here to the States. And so I never knew my dad's father because he died shortly after I was born, I think. Okay. And I didn't grow up there, so I had no idea. And the man was the Minister of Finance for Egypt under King Fuad,
Wow.
And you go, I can't even balance a checkbook. Where did this come from? And you realize that when we don't know who our people were, and I found out just recently that we have a lot of Turkish blood and it's Ottoman blood, and it's like, God, I don't know whether to feel good or not about that, But when we don't know where we come from, I think it's hard to know who we are. Now, I'm very different, very, very different than the rest of my family, as you can imagine.
Sure.
I come from a Muslim background, and yet I am something, again, other, perhaps. I have no idea what to call myself, but I certainly was never like the others in my family. And so I have to believe that it was okay. I was pushed out of the circle a little bit, hopefully for some good reason. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you're you. Yeah.
I'm me. I'm me. And I feel the love of my ancestors, and I feel that they are watching, and I hear their voices a lot. Not so much I'm going to cut my ear off like Van Gogh did, but it's just, I hear their wisdom, and they call me boy, which I just love. There's something about that I really love.
Yeah.
And there is such a sense of true happiness in me with them. So I think it's a daily thing for me.
I love that. I absolutely do. What about you, Erica? Any rituals at this point for your ancestors or in general?
I'm for sure going to set a place at the table this year, because Samhain is when the veil is thin, which is, it's easier, even if you're not a medium like you are, it is easier to feel your ancestors. And I'm always amazed by, I looked at the maths recently, I saw it, of how many ancestors were required to create me. And it's a phenomenal amount when you take it back. And also just the fact that I'm sitting here, those people went through extraordinary times. They went through difficulties and wars, and they did whatever was needed to get me here right now. So I think for sure that's a time to say, thank you. And I'm sure I don't know the half of it, actually, because unless somebody in the family wrote it down, or unless you have one of these wonderful families who passed stories down through the generations. And again, that's a ritual I think we have lost that would have happened at Samhain, is that people told stories about the past and their ancestors, because it was dark and you went inside and you took the flame from the bonfire. And you sat around, and if you'd got a bard or a musician, they would sit around in the dark, and as a child you would hear the stories of your ancestors, and I think we've lost that.
Yeah.
And I just was looking for that very meme, and I knew I'd saved it somewhere. So I'm
Well done.
dyslexic numerically, so this could be very, very funny, but I'm going to try and say what it says on this sheet. So we have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third great-grandparents, 64 fourth great-grandparents, 128 fifth great-grandparents, 256 sixth great-grandparents, all the way down to 2048 ninth great-grandparents. And like you, Katie, in my work, sometimes I'll be sitting in front of someone who's the calmest, most together, most respectable person, and I'll be seeing, as I'm tuning into their energy, some really vicious anger or some deep sorrow, and they'll be saying, well, it's not something I recognize, and I'll be like, yeah, but now I'm going to quote that. So 2048 ninth great grandparents, and those are the ones that we can trace back most probably. But
yeah,
I'm really, really conscious of my ancestors at the moment. So through my mother's side, they were really amazing gardeners. And if I look back in my history, way back to the 16th, 15th centuries, we were cattle, I was going to say hoarders then, I didn't mean that, ranchers and sheep farmers and all of that. And just very, very lately, so after I got to about 50, I started to want to use my hands in the garden, which I've been the biggest city dweller and traveler and not interested in putting roots down, and definitely not interested in getting my hands dirty or being outside in the rain. But I'm so aware that this project that I'm trying to get off the ground now is my grandparents. And I think even when you did a reading for me, Katie, you were like, oh, your granddad's here and he's telling you that he's helping you. And I absolutely know things that I don't know. Caroline doesn't know, but I've got this knowledge flowing through me, and it's outstanding. It's really comforting and it feels really wonderful. But I did want to mention that a lady called Magenta Pixie, who does a lot of astrological stuff, and I wouldn't even start to claim to be anyone who can talk about the astrology, but she says that this particular Halloween the planets are all totally aligned, and Mo, you can probably chip in with this and tell me what I mean, but for huge change, and I mean monumental change. So we've got, a full blue moon, Halloween.
Yeah.
Some planetary lining. I'd love if you could, Mo, talk to that a little bit.
Well, let me look at that, because I hate to be that guy, but there's always a guy who is kind of the jerk who says, well, it's not really this, but I'm that guy.
I'm hearing it's not.
It is. They're calling it a blue moon, but it is not an actual blue moon. This has become the vernacular, and I bristle at that because a real blue moon is the third of 4 full moons in one season, and that's not what this is. Okay. So, but that's okay. It's the second full moon in 1 month, the first being on the first, and so that's fine. And then there was a thing on Facebook which enraged me, which has said this is the first full moon on Halloween since 1944, and that was just not correct. It's the first full moon on Halloween that is in all time zones in the United States. Because usually it's like after midnight or whatever. So it's like, I don't know, people. So it is important, I think, but it's the hunter's moon, which should be a dead giveaway that we should be looking for something and trying to track something down. I'm looking at the chart of the sky, and of course I'm a Vedic astrologer. We don't deal with the outer planets. It's so much easier and it's not as messy, I don't think, but that's just me. It doesn't negate Western astrology, but I would have to say I don't know what she's referring to. What I'm seeing is that it is the new year tomorrow, and of course the Celtic and old systems, because and Samhain, by the way, is actually a solar holiday. All the eight spokes of the wheel are all solar holidays. And so it will actually occur on the 5th of November rather than being tomorrow. But it was always much easier to just say, okay, it's the end of October, you know. But here's what I would say. I would say that that things are going to have to be put more or less into their place. There's going to be, for the next year, a lot of extreme hard work and incredible investigations going on all over the world about some of the ties that have become too close and too well hidden. This is all because Mars is retrograde in Pisces in the Vedic system. So, and this is going to happen once again in the Vedic system in Aries. This full moon will be in Aries. In the Western, it's going to be in Taurus, but it's not that way here. And what that means is it actually will be in Aries when this happens. I don't know if you caught the moon last night, but it was not far from Mars, and it was really something to see. It really was something to see. Mars is outstanding in the sky right now. So you should go take a look at it. But this is going to be a year of reparation, regardless of what happens. I'm sure that the two of you are watching what's going on in this country with abject horror, you know. Maybe some disgust and maybe some wonder. I know you've got your own version of it over there.
Oh, yes.
We have. Can I just go back to what I said? So you're not seeing big change. You're seeing
nothing big. It's constant change.
Okay.
I don't see like a moment of this is when it all turns. I don't think it's a stretch for us to say that the world is in a bit of a pickle. You know, look at this country's on fire. My state is on fire where I live, not far from where I grew up. They're having the biggest forest fires this state has ever seen, and California. And so if there is a change, Caroline, in consciousness here in this country, I'm hoping that it will kind of spread throughout the world. But I think the rest of the world kind of gets it. Don't you think so? I mean, would you say that you're not on the wrestling mats in your country as like we are here, are you?
We still have Brexit, the fallout from that. We have every sympathy with you because what you have going on is tearing families apart, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah.
Because we had that with Brexit. It literally, and it's still, and Brexit kind of got put on the back burner because then COVID happened. But actually, Brexit isn't done yet. It's kind of being negotiated at the moment. So we still have fraught things going on. But I just think worldwide there is and I could say that it's to do with social media, but I think there's a lot more to it than that. We are getting polarized in our opinions. So there's a lot of aggression. I mean, what happened this week in France is just heartbreaking. And that's because somebody just so believes that they're right. They go and behead people. Dear heaven. Right. I just think we're getting very divisive. And maybe that needs to happen in order for us all to take a good, hard look at our opinions and our behavior. Maybe it has to happen that way.
That's a tricky topic too, because they knew what they were doing when they crossed that line. You know what I mean? By depicting the Prophet Muhammad in a cartoon, that is like the big taboo. You don't do that. And so, but they are of course, la liberté, right? They're practicing freedom, and so. I mean, we have to be aware. Maybe what we need to become more aware of is that we are no longer separate societies. We are one world culture right now. And that to get along with each other, we have to be able to know each other and respect each other a little bit. I'm not saying that anything happened was right. I'm just saying if you poke something enough, it will turn on you. I mean, we have these stories all the time in Yellowstone Park here in the West, where people taunt buffalo, bison, or grizzly bears. And everyone's amazed when the creature turns on them and gores them, or
God.
whatever the case may be. It happens all the time.
Living near
And
Yellowstone, I can attest.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
We have this in the news all summer long.
that's
every
right.
year. Every
Crazy.
year.
Oh,
And
dear.
what does it say?
part of
Don't
this
feed
is
the bears.
Yeah. What part of this is the
Don't
bear
poke the
and it has
bear.
claws
Yeah.
and teeth are they
That's
not
right.
getting? Oh, God.
But I kind
But
of think that,
go ahead, please.
if we're looking at the planet, like stepping back from politics, from race, from history, maybe not history, and just looking at the planet, and there is rumor around that we are supposed to be moving from 3D into 5D, and I think what's being demonstrated very clearly to me, I don't know if you others feel the same, is that we're just not ready. We just are not ready. When was it okay to, like when Brexit was going on the radio, there was people ringing up and saying, I'm never speaking to my family again. They want to stay and I want to leave. And it was like, but that was really, really common. And, I just don't understand the logic of, I can't allow you to be who you are and what you
Right.
believe, so much so that I'm going to cut you
yeah.
out of my life. I just, with family, I mean,
Well, the basis of that is that we are tribal creatures. That is our instinct, is to be tribal. When I was a young man, a hippie freak, we called ourselves a tribe. It was a tribe of, and there were, of course, sub-tribes and mini tribes, and, but we had this feeling of community that was very unlike the tribe of our parents and grandparents.
yeah.
But now these tribes, because of the amazing ability to communicate, I mean, let's talk about this. Do you two remember what it was like making an overseas phone call back when we were kids?
Oh, yes. Well, you
You had to
didn't.
yell.
You didn't.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You just
My mom and dad would call Egypt,
Wrote a letter.
and it's yelling, it's hi, and it was 3 days to set up a call.
Yeah.
And because there was like one phone, and now look at us. We're speaking 7 time zones away from each other, each one being 15 degrees of longitude. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
And the call is going up thousands of miles into the sky and then bouncing back down. I mean, that always blows my mind.
So that has to change us. Katie, you're right. So, or Erica, when you said social media. So the tribe has become much less one of being forced into something and one more of choice. And those choices are not always soundly made,
Totally.
Yeah, we don't always think before we choose our tribe. Now, during the Civil War in this country, there were families that fought each other, killed each other on the battlefield. It happened.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And that was
Oh, yeah.
what that division is what caused the Wild West in this country to happen the way it did, which was a lawlessness that was supposedly, they called the Colt 45 the great equalizer. In fact, it was not that at all, And we're beginning to see that lawlessness here and in France and perhaps in the UK too. I'm not sure. But I do know that what is happening is that we are in culture shock. Caroline, you're right. We're not ready because we have not assimilated into the next phase of what being a human is. Mm-hmm. I would love to see everyone celebrate Samhain, and I would love to see them celebrate it as it's meant to be, a respectful, somber celebration of life and an appreciation of the fact that we're all headed into that other realm,
Absolutely.
and a love of life.
Yes. Well, and thank you, Mo. That's a good segue, drawing back to Samhain for a few minutes and to those celebrations and those festivals. A couple of things I want to throw out there for discussion. First of all, I had read this morning, and I didn't know this before, and I just thought it was pretty fascinating that when the Druids celebrated Samhain, all of the fires would be extinguished, and then a new fire would be lit. And that fire would have all of the bones of all of the animal sacrifices thrown into it. It was a bonfire, which is now known as a bonfire.
Fire. Yep.
Yep, I did not know that. I've always wondered why a bonfire is called a bonfire. Well, that's where it came from.
And you
That's
put
the
the ash on your
whitewashed
fields.
story. That's
Sure.
the cleaned up story.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they were.
The
Yeah, they
Druids
did
were
lots of naughty things too. But
yeah, the Druids were pretty hardcore. I mean, they
Oh,
really
yeah.
were. And one of the truths of being human is that human sacrifice has been a part of our culture or a part of our species from the very beginning,
Sure.
as well as cannibalism. I hate to bring that up, but it's still, it. Luckily, we don't do it so much anymore. But there's more than that, and it was just this remarkable thing that Samhain represented so much.
Yeah.
It represented, because these were offerings that were made. Offerings, it was almost, it's not bribery, but it's kind of like, okay, we're going to give you all this stuff. Give us a good year. If we
Yes.
sacrifice
Mhm.
some old people here, which is what I think our president is doing in this country, but that's a different story. Because I'm hunkering down. I'm on the hit list, if I get this disease. But and I speak out of frustration because 7 members of my family have had COVID or have it currently. And
Oh,
So
this is a
sorry.
monstrous disease,
yeah.
monstrous.
Oh, it is.
But anyway, so the whole idea was if we will give you these lives, you will give us new lives that then will create more and more and more. And
Yeah.
they believed a lot of that,
Mhm.
They believed that their trees were ancestors, as did African tribes as well.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be
Who
really.
says they're not?
No,
Sure.
I'm having this really flippant image, and it's really, really, really inappropriate. But I think one of the things, I completely agree with you, and one of the things I wanted to say is that when they were in those ceremonies, they were so present. There was nothing else that was important. They were there, and I just have this image of a druid's phone going off and him saying, "Oh, sorry."
Sorry. How do you turn this thing off? Does it have an off switch?
Our sense of sanctity and reverence, where is it? Because what you're talking about is me honoring the people who came before me, and who else is more important than that? Nobody, I don't think. And the same for yours and Erica's and Katie's and everybody who's listening. So I would love to see exactly what you said, everyone really remembering what reverence is. I think that's my favorite word of the moment at the moment. But yeah, sorry to interject with that, but it was just it was
No, it's wonderful. Look what Halloween is in this country here today. And I'm hoping and praying that they're not going to trick or treat. I wouldn't let my kids trick or treat. It's a dangerous time. But we stopped about, I would say, 3 years ago letting trick or treat. We used to decorate. My whole goal was to create fear in every kid that came around the corner to my house, and because I was scared as a child, and it was important for me. The fears, I grew up in a haunted house for about 3 years, not forever, but it taught me how to deal with fear in a very, very realistic way, and I always liked that chill. It's a good thing. But lately, the last few years, instead of having neighborhood kids, because that's what it's about, neighborhood trust. Trust your neighbors. You're going to trust your neighbors to do the one thing that you tell your children never to do: take candy, right?
Yeah.
Give those kids candy, and they're going to eat them, but they're neighbors. Well, lately we've had church groups and groups of like 3 and 4 vans filled with kids from other neighborhoods or other sides of town that come into the neighborhood, and they let them all out. And you've got 30, 40 kids suddenly going from house to house, and they're not even from the area. And that, to me, is not what it's about. It's about teaching our children reverence. It's about teaching our children about the past, not getting them started on type 2 diabetes, And and so in this country, it has been completely, and the whole, have you seen in this country, they have sexy voting ballot costumes for women?
Yeah.
What the
Yeah.
hell?
Right.
Sexy
What the hell are all
masks.
sexy, costumes?
Yeah,
Come
I
on.
call it slutty. The slutty nurse, the slutty this, the slutty cop. And it's, when did it become? Now, it was always a rather sexual holiday. because once you've gotten kind of, it's funny. Have you ever experienced that business with you go to a funeral and you find yourself afterward wanting to I'll stop right there. Anyway, so obviously not with the person, but with the person who died, obviously. But the whole point is that when we observe the solemnity and the wonder of death, we need to engage in life. So sex was always a big part of the festivals around Samhain that at least what I've seen. And certainly in ancient Egypt, that was that way too. They'd get good and sloshed, and then they would go ahead and frolic.
Yeah.
And create life again.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly.
on the topic of costumes,
Mm-hmm.
of
I
course,
could
there's
talk
all
about-
kinds of costuming now, but way back when there was costuming as well for different reasons. Anybody want to speak to that?
Mumming. Is that what you're referring to?
No, they wore costumes to, at least at some point, to scare off the fairies or the Tuatha De
Yeah,
Danann.
I've got that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And at least as far as Samhain or Samhain is concerned, that was a part of, that's where costuming for us loosely came from.
Let me tell you what, if there was ever a fairy that was scared by a person in a costume, I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
But I can tell you about pumpkins. I did research pumpkins today. Is that an interesting topic?
Absolutely.
Always.
Go.
So, apparently, they came from Asia to America about 10,000 years ago. And historically, specifically in England, I don't know, it must be the same in America, used to carve turnips and potatoes and put a lantern in them, and it was a right faff, and it was really awful. But there's even proof that the Maoris carved gourds and things like that for lanterns millions of years, well, however old the Maoris are. But anyway, basically, so it wasn't until early this century that a guy called Howden decided that he was going to make the pumpkin, this big round orange thing that we all know today, and that's become the standard, if you like. And the reason you guys eat pumpkin pie, I found this fascinating, was somebody shipped a load of pumpkins over to France who came up with the pie and shipped it back to America. That probably took more than 10 minutes. But anyway, so you guys eat pumpkin pie. We don't really eat that in England, as far as I'm aware. But anyway, you guys eat pumpkin pie because the French invented it for you. So that's what I found out today. I really enjoyed that.
No wonder we put garlic in pumpkin pie. I always wondered that.
Well, and of course, it had been tradition, more traditional rather than pumpkins. Initially, they'd carve turnips.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys ever tried to carve a turnip?
I have.
I'd rather not. Yeah.
I tried it
really
one year
hard.
and I hurt myself. I actually cut myself trying to do it.
I'm not
So I just eat them raw now, but that's a different story. Well, the idea of pumpkins too, if you think about it, is they fit right in with this idea of Samhain, because you cut this thing open and you pull out gobs and gobs and gobs of seeds.
Yeah.
And it's like Erica was saying earlier, right? You throw those seeds in the ground and you have pumpkins for the next year. This is exactly what it should be. It should be a pumpkin. And, those pumpkins are almost inedible. But I happen to like pumpkin. I like pumpkin stew. It's very good.
I like it
love
roasted.
pumpkin.
Mhm.
I love
Really
spicy pumpkin stew. Oh, yes.
So
Okay, wait a minute. How do you make that?
What, with pumpkin stew?
No, I don't know.
Oh, pumpkin? Oh, it's easy. You get the smaller pumpkins, the ones that they often use for pie, right?
Mhm.
yeah.
I've tried using the big pumpkins, but they're really tough. They eventually will soften up, but the flavor is not as good. I happen to like the flavor of raw pumpkin, which is good for a stomach ache, but not good for much anything else. And the next day, you don't want to be too far from the loo, as you call it over there, and but heavy stuff. But pumpkin, so you just cut it into pieces, and if you want meat, you put the meat in, but you put the pumpkin in instead of potatoes, and really almost, in my opinion, instead of anything else. You'd want it thick with pumpkin, because I love the flavor of squash. I just am such a fan of it. And if you let it cook long enough, it really softens up nicely. And I will usually put a little nutmeg in it, which is kind of, an homage to the pie thing. And it's great. It is absolutely wonderful. And if you take some pumpkin seeds and sprinkle them on top, you can puree part of it if you want, but I usually just eat it as is, burn my mouth. But it's really good.
Yeah, I love to curry it, or you could use the Mexican spice, but curry would be better. I cut it into pieces, the flesh, and put it in the oven with a curry, and so you roast it, and then I make the soup. I do, standard onion, sweat the onion, put the pumpkin in, put in some coconut milk is brilliant. Yep. Make this beautiful, thick, spicy, rich stew. And then with the seeds, you just at the last minute, you put them in the oven and toast them, toss them in maple syrup and cinnamon and sprinkle them on top.
Oh my God, that sounds wonderful. Samhain is about food.
Yes, so anyway,
it's
I'm
about
making
food. Yeah. I mean, it really is.
One that we lost.
Feeding them.
It is. I'm looking at barmbrack. Now, I haven't had barmbrack in years. That's Irish fruitcake.
Irish fruit? Oh, I've never heard of it.
It's an Irish fruitcake. I'm guessing that somewhere Christmas cake got involved in this because it is the same thing. But they did it as a fortune-telling thing for Samhain. And and again, this is a Christmas thing. So I think the two got blended. But you put muslin-wrapped treats. You baked it inside your barmbrack fruitcake. Now, I don't know if you did it in the States, but over here when I was a kid, we used to put Christmas pudding, used to have threepenny bits in it.
Yeah.
And you'd kind of
No, we don't have Christmas pudding in the States at all. No. We read about it in A Christmas Carol, but that's it.
Oh, it's gorgeous. You either like fruitcake or you don't.
Well, in this country, fruitcake is a punchline to a joke. And it's unfortunate because I think this stuff can be pretty good,
Oh, I love fruitcake.
But we do have in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and all the Cajun country, they have around Mardi Gras, they have what's called a king cake. And it is a cake that is baked. My brother was a chef and he used to make these things. And they put a little baby, not a real baby. That's long gone. I'm kidding. It was never done. It's for Lent, But they put a little figurine of a baby in the cake. And they serve the cake at a party, and whoever gets the baby has to make the cake for the next year. And is considered to have good luck all year long. So that's why they get to make the cake, because they've had all this luck. So yeah, it's cool. I like stuff like that.
Yeah, well, in Ireland, they used to say
comments. Sorry, there's some people posting yummy pictures of what they do with their pumpkins in the comments. So thank you everyone for being here, and these pictures are great. Sorry, Erica, carry on.
I was just going to say going on for the barmbrack, what they used to do, but the version for Samhain was that the treats inside, if you found a ring, surprise, surprise, they said you were going to get married. A piece of straw meant you're going to have a prosperous year. I don't think I'd like to find straw in my cake, but hey.
That gags me a little bit.
Yeah. A pea means the person will not marry that year. A stick, I certainly don't want one of those in my. It means an unhappy marriage. And needless to say, a coin represents good fortune, unless, as you do, as I did as a kid, and you find the threepenny bit and nearly break your tooth on it.
Right.
But yeah.
That sounds like it would be a very big cake to have straw and money and all the other things.
I'm guessing it probably, or maybe you only put a few of them in. But
in this country, we would just buy, like a store-bought, like Hostess Twinkies. I don't know if you have Twinkies in the UK, but they are iconic in this country.
What is a Twinkie?
It's a real treat. It's
big question mark over my head.
They call it sponge cake. And they were, when I was a kid, when I was a wee little one, we were eating Twinkies. So they've been around forever. And it's a golden sponge cake, they call it. Look it up on the internet. You may have an equal.
Okay.
and they stuff it with some sort of cream that is sweet, that is supposedly has lard in it, but I don't know for sure. And the joke is that they have a shelf life of 33 years. Now, I don't think that's true, but you could just shove something in a Twinkie and give that out at the holidays. We really eat terribly unhealthy food. There is good food, of course, but the stuff we love, not so good.
But getting back to Samhain, so yeah, I just would like to say I wish you all great connection with your ancestors. Take some time out of your busy life. When did you say it was? The 5th? Or is it tomorrow night?
Yeah, no. Well, tomorrow night will be Halloween. Let's call it observed, Samhain observed. It's when the sun is exactly 45 degrees from the vernal or the autumnal equinox. So it's right exactly in between the equinox and the solstice, right?
Okay, so
and those are the cross-border days.
Whenever that is, I wish you great connection with your ancestors and masses of downloads of knowledge and inspiration and lots of yummy food. That's what I would like to say.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Thank you. We have 2 more minutes. Anybody else want to throw any thoughts out there about ritual or what they're going to do this year to celebrate the holiday?
Whatever you do, light some candles.
Yeah,
sorry.
I agree with you 100%.
Candlelight is essential. Sorry, off you go, Mo.
Just for me, this year is unfortunately a somber one. We have lost a lot of our fellow human beings this year due to COVID.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky I haven't lost my brother. He had 6 surgeries so far, and probably more on the horizon, and lung problems for the rest of his life. And it just bothers me that we're not taking this more seriously. And so many of us have
been affected. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, this is more somber than usual, but valuable and precious.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you for throwing that out there, Mo. I think it's really important for us to remember this year that plenty of families have empty seats at the table right now. And yeah, in observing the dead.
I haven't seen my grandkids in 6 months, 7 months. I mean, 9 months. I'm not going to see them at Thanksgiving. I'm not going to see them at Christmas. This is a time for reflection. This is a time for love.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well, you guys, we've definitely talked down to the end of the show. I appreciate you all so much. I want to make sure that all of you listening do know that Caroline and Erica and Mo and me are professional psychic advisors over at 12listen.com. That's number 2listen.com. And you guys can find us all over there just about any day. And if we're not there and you want to talk to one of us, just issue us a callback request or a scheduled call, and we will certainly get back to you. But want to make sure you know how to connect with all of us. And of course, I want to thank you all so much for attending, for going along with my harebrained ideas. I appreciate your support very, very much. And I'm thrilled. This is a wonderful way to kick off the day. So thank you all so much.
It's been so much fun. Thanks for having us. And really good luck with the rest of the day.
It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. What a gracious panel. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And of course, to be part of.
Oh, thank you so much. And of course, Mo, you'll be back later in the day with our Scary Stories show. So I'm excited for that as well.
So you guys freaked out at how many I have.
I can't wait. That's going to be a super, super fun show. So you guys, of course, stay tuned because coming up very next is Witchy Ways. And of course, we will be welcoming Aaron and Jay and Raven to that show. And then, of course, so much more to come. So thank you all for being here. You have been listening to Samhain Through the Ages here on 12 Radio, where we're changing the way you get scared with the world.